Court is in session. I think the jury just got back and they're getting settled in. Is there anything that we would need to take care of before they return into the courtroom?
I don't believe so. Well, I don't want to speak for the
We're going to want some time to talk about scheduling. It doesn't have to be right now.
We could do it now while they're getting settled in.
Okay.
They're not here. We don't have to be. So what is it that you needed help with?
We're trying to coordinate an opportunity to take Benjamin Crump's deposition, and the only time that's been offered to us was to begin at 6 p.m. Sunday, several days from now, and we object to that schedule. We're available all day tomorrow.
What is the scheduling issue with Mr. Blackwell?
We asked that Mr. Crump be available tomorrow because we knew that was a holiday, and we were told that neither he nor Mr. Blackwell, as I understand it, were available, and that they suggested that we begin at 6 p.m. on Sunday. That's not realistic or practical for us. While the deposition is relatively limited in scope, that doesn't necessarily mean it will be short because of potential objections, and there are indeed some new areas that may have come up as a result of Ms. Gentile's testimony.
What is it that you're asking for?
Well, the first thing I'm asking for is this. I would ask that the court recess on Friday so that we have that opportunity to take Mr. Crump's deposition. We also want to take the deposition of Steve Brenton with FDLE. We were provided with his report on June 4th, the one that's been the subject of many things, including the sanctions motion. We've had no opportunity since we started the Fry and other hearings and then jury selection, no opportunity to take his deposition and any follow-up there. So we need to do that. We need to take Mr. Crump's deposition. There are some other witnesses. If we had the opportunity, we would like to take their deposition.
Let me interrupt you for just a moment. What is the availability of Mr. Benton?
I believe he can be available almost any time, but I haven't checked with him recently. This is the first I've heard of this in terms of the need to do him right away. I know that in the past they had talked about wanting to take his deposition, but...
Okay, because I know the state has said that they are planning on resting today, and this court intends to begin the defense on Friday, and that's what I had informed you yesterday. I have a jury that is sequestered. They're away from their home, from their families, and to have to take off for 4th of July, which everybody has requested and the court is obliging because it is a national holiday, to then also take off Friday and have them there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday sequestered somewhere where they not occupied is just not reasonable. Mr. Crump has been available since we began this trial on June 10th until that was the jury selection process, until he was sequestered as a potential witness from the courtroom, but he was here for every day. I don't know what Mr. Blackwell's schedule is, but it has now been almost a month since we started jury selection or even our Fry hearing. I believe he was here on June 6th in the courtroom during those Fry hearings. The court recessed early on different days, so I don't know what Mr. Blackwell's schedule was, but to have this court continue keeping a jury sequestered without having court time because you didn't coordinate that deposition within a month's period of time, I find that very hard to do.
From a scheduling standpoint, we didn't know until late in the day on June 3rd that we would be allowed to take his deposition.
Well, that's a month ago. That's 30 days ago.
Your Honor, we've been somewhat tied up for the last month,
Well,
beginning with June 6th, 7th, and 8th in the Fry hearing and the sanctions hearing that we haven't even finished yet. On June 9th, we met with our jury consultant and Mr. Zimmerman to prepare for jury selection, which started June 10th.
And it's my understanding that you had taken there were some depositions that were 5:30 last night. It's my understanding there's more depositions scheduled for 5:30 tonight. There's not been a request from this court to conclude court a little earlier on any day for the purposes of taking any other deposition. So I want to start, if the state rests today, the defense has Thursday, which is a holiday that you could utilize for whatever purposes you need to get ready, but it was always this court's intention that as soon as the state rests, that the defense begins their case. That's how it happens in every case I've ever had, and was my intention to continue to do that. And Friday would be the first business day after the holiday, so...
What we're asking for is a little more time, given the way this case has proceeded. As the court's aware, we were still litigating the admissibility of evidence after the jury selection began. We certainly couldn't have taken Mr. Crump's deposition during the trial day. The court doesn't expect either Mr. O'Mara or myself to leave the courtroom, I wouldn't think, to take his
You've left for other reasons, but I don't want to
Your
go
Honor,
there. I don't want to go there. And I don't want to get into a discussion back and forth about what times may have been available, but it's never been requested for this court to recess even a half hour earlier. I know during the Fry hearings, we recessed on a Saturday because your witness wasn't available, and the court had to continually ask when your witness would be available to finish it. I had to be the one who moved that forward. Neither side moved that forward because I wanted to get that matter finished because you wanted to know an answer about it before opening statements, and I accomplished that. And if there had been a request to recess even an hour earlier, I would have done that. But now I have a jury sequestered that are going to be off on Thursday, and you don't want court on Friday, that's Saturday, Sunday. I'm not doing that.
We asked the court
Okay, end of
to continue
discussion.
the case so that we could take Mr. Crump's deposition, so we could finish the Fry hearing just for a few days before we started jury selection. We have been, I think, asking at every opportunity for some additional time to finish these critically important aspects of the case. Likewise, I'm simply asking for some time now. I don't know if Mr. Crump's in the building today. The court could entertain ordering him to appear tomorrow.
We are taking up now time that I want to conclude this case. The state has indicated that that they would be finished with their case today. I would like to bring the jury in. You can continue to discuss this with me after the state has rested. Are we ready to bring the jury in?
Yes, Your Honor, and just for point of clarification, I know we've had some delays throughout, and I just want to, I'm still pushing for the end of the day. We
I
may go
am
into
too.
Friday
That's why I
morning.
would like to get
We
started.
may go into Friday morning, but it would be Friday morning at the latest.
Let's
I
go.
appreciate it.
I'm prepared to go as long today as we need to get the state to rest their case so we can move on with the case.
No, just so that the court is
No,
aware.
please have a seat. We will discuss this after we finish for the day. I would like to bring the jury in.
Yes,
You'll
Your Honor.
have an opportunity. Thank you very much. Let's bring the jury in.
Jury's present, Your Honor.
Please be seated. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. While you're getting settled in, I'm going to ask my questions. If your answer is yes to any of the questions, please raise your hand. During the lunch recess, did any of you have any discussions amongst yourselves or with anybody else about the case? No hands are being raised. Did any of you read or listen to any radio, television, or newspaper reports about the case? No hands are being raised. Did any of you use any type of an electronic device to get on the internet to do independent research about the case, people, places, things, or terminology? No hands are being raised. And finally, did any of you read or create any emails, text messages, Twitters, tweets, blogs, or social networking pages about the case? No hands are being raised. Thank you very much. State, call your next witness.
And we call Anthony Gorgon.
Raise your right hand. Please solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall present will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. You state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
My name is Anthony Gorgon. That's spelled Gorgone.
What is your occupation, sir?
I'm a crime lab analyst at the Florida Department of Law Enforcement in the biology or DNA section.
How long have you been working for, I'm going to refer to it as FDLE, but the Florida Department of Law Enforcement?
I've been with FDLE for a little over 7 years. I started in March of 2006.
Could you briefly tell us about your education and training regarding your occupation, sir?
Yes, I received a Bachelor's of Science in Molecular and Microbiology. That was from the University of Central Florida, graduated in 2004. I was hired by the Florida Department of Law Enforcement as a forensic technologist. In that position, I screened items of evidence for the possible presence of bodily fluids that may contain DNA. I was promoted to crime lab analyst in July of 2007. I underwent a 13-month training program for that position. The first half of that training program was background readings, written and oral exams. The second part of that training was supervised casework. That would be actual casework under the supervision of a trained analyst. And that training, that 13 months culminated in a mock trial.
And have you kept up with the latest information regarding DNA, sir?
Yes, I regularly read articles published in scientific journals, as well as I'm required to attend at least 8 hours annually of outside training. That's usually conferences and workshops and classes dealing with the field.
Have you previously testified in court as an expert in DNA, and does that also include the significance of your finding regarding population stats?
Yes, I've testified 28 times in different counties in Central Florida prior to today, and almost every time that deals with statistics.
Your Honor, this time I tender the witness as an expert in DNA and statistics regarding DNA matters.
He may so testify.
No voir dire, Your Honor. Thank you.
Everybody by now has heard of DNA, but can you briefly tell the jury what DNA is?
Yes, DNA, it stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. It's the genetic material that's passed down from generation to generation. Every person gets half of their DNA from their mother and half of their DNA from their father. And it's the genetic blueprint that makes each person unique. It codes for everything about you, everything from the pigment making up your eye color to the enzymes in your stomach breaking down your lunch right now.
And how is DNA used in a forensic setting?
Forensically, your DNA is found, a copy of your DNA is found in almost every cell in your body. Therefore, it can be left behind in bodily fluids that you leave behind, such as blood, semen, saliva, also sometimes hair and skin cells as well. And forensically, I could use those bodily fluids to develop what I call a DNA profile, which would be to analyze the DNA at certain locations on the DNA molecule, develop a DNA profile that can be used for identification purposes and comparison.
Are there other uses for this technology other than in a forensic or criminal setting?
Yes, several fields use DNA, the same DNA testing that I use. It's used in medical and genetic research. It's used in organ and blood transplant donor-recipient evaluations. It's used to test any abnormalities in the fetus during pregnancy when they do the amniocentesis. It's used in the identification of mass disaster victims, as well as the Innocence Project and paternity testing as well.
Is the DNA profiling and comparison method using STR that you're going to talk about, that your lab uses, being accepted in the scientific community as being reliable?
Yes, it is.
And is your lab, FDLE, been accredited and been through all the hoops in terms of their accreditations or being findings that they're proficient, et cetera?
Yes, we are an accredited laboratory.
Okay. I want to talk about the laboratory procedures for a few minutes if we could. Do you all have an established protocol or methods in which an item comes into your lab where you make sure that there's no contamination and that kind of stuff?
Yes, we have a quality assurance program that says that we have documentation of all the quality procedures. We have standard operating procedures that give specific instructions for every test that I do, so that every person working in the lab is on the same page and one person isn't doing one thing their way and another person doing another thing their way. So we have written protocols, and all of our quality assurance program is in writing.
And are there any controls within the testing themselves in terms of positive and negative controls to verify that what you're doing is accurate in terms of not getting any misidentification or contamination?
Yes, there are positive and negative controls at just about every step of the way. Before I even do the DNA testing, if I'm screening for the possible presence of blood, I need to test a positive control and a negative control of blood to make sure the chemicals I'm using are working. During the DNA testing, I have positive controls where I have a DNA profile. I need to get that expected DNA profile at the end of the process to know that not only that the chemicals and the instruments are working, but that my techniques are good as well. There are also negative controls at a few steps during the way, and those would be blank samples, and those samples need to remain blank the entire process.
In the lab, while you're analyzing evidence that's submitted in the lab, do you wear any kind of clothing attire to make sure that you don't cross-contaminate anything?
Yes, whenever I have an item of evidence open and I'm physically examining that item, I'm required to wear a lab coat, a mask, gloves, and sometimes a hairnet depending on the item. When I'm actually working with the tubes and actually doing the DNA testing process, I'm also required to wear a lab coat and mask and work in chemical hoods with it's a sash that covers in front of my face.
And are all these procedures for quality control methods that you all utilize at FDLE, are they used by other labs in terms of being accredited?
Yes, any lab with a quality assurance program in place is going to have very similar protocols as far as quality control.
Tell us, if you could, briefly about proficiency testing in terms of testing yourself and also your lab to make sure that what you all are doing is working properly.
A proficiency test is a test given to me by an outside company. It's mailed in, and it's a set of samples that I have to work as if it were a regular case. And I perform that testing and send the results back to that company, and then they send a notice back saying, yes, you got the correct results, or no, you did not get the correct results. I'm required to take a proficiency test every 6 months. So I take one about May and about November of every year. And I've done that every year that I've been doing independent casework since August of 2008.
And is the entire lab also subject to proficiency testing? The DNA lab, or the lab, but the DNA department of the lab also?
Yes, every crime lab analyst and even the forensic technologists have to go through some kind of proficiency test twice a year.
Okay. Let's briefly talk about the exhibits themselves that would be tendered into your lab for analysis. In terms of making sure that you have the right exhibit in front of you when you're analyzing it, what kind of quality controls do you all have? Is there some numbering system or some cataloging of the items when they come in?
When an item is submitted for testing, we get items from outside agencies, such as local law enforcement agencies in the Central Florida area. They submit the items to our evidence intake section. The evidence intake section makes sure that that item is in a sealed condition, and they issue it an exhibit number for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, exhibit number, and put a barcode label and a case number on it. And then that item gets brought up to me once I'm assigned the case, and then I also examine that item to make sure it's in a sealed condition, and we have that barcode label, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement case number and exhibit number.
Do you also document when you analyze something in terms of putting your initials or some kind of markings to be able to say, like you will have to in here in court, and say, yeah, I know I examined this item?
Yes, I mark the package before I open the package, I mark that package with my initials, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement case number, exhibit, and the date that I'm examining that item. And then the actual item itself, unless there's a reason why I can't mark that item, I will mark that item as well with that same information.
Okay. Let's now move on to the DNA testing you did in this specific case. I believe you use STR DNA testing, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us, when we talk about STR DNA testing, what we mean by that, or what you mean by that, I should say.
STR testing is short tandem repeat testing, and I'm analyzing short segments on the DNA molecule that are highly repetitive segments. They don't actually code for any physical characteristic or any kind of molecule inside your body that's doing a job. They are just repetitive, non-coding regions of DNA, and I can take advantage of the fact that those repetitive sequences vary from individual to individual. So I can use these short segments of DNA to develop a profile for that individual.
And if you could, I'd like you to break down in terms of the STR process, are there, I think, 3 or 4 steps that you have to go through in order to first determine whether you have enough DNA and to actually develop it?
Yes. Well, the first step would obviously be analyzing the item of evidence for the possible bodily fluids, the blood, semen, saliva, as well as hair and skin cells. Once I have that stain that I want to perform DNA testing on, I take a small portion of that stain or swab and I put it in a tube and use heat and chemicals to perform what I call an extraction. That breaks open the cells in that stain, exposes the DNA molecule, and then hopefully I can isolate that molecule and wash away all of the debris and all the other chemicals in that sample. The next step would be called quantification, where I take that sample and see about how concentrated, about how much DNA was I able to recover from that stain. And I use that information for the next step, which is amplification. I'm basically making Xerox copies almost of the DNA molecule, but only at these 13 or 15 different regions that I'm interested in testing to develop the DNA profile. I make millions and millions of copies of the molecule at these specific regions so that I can analyze these regions. The last step is called electrophoresis, where I actually separate out the DNA molecules that I was able to amplify by size. I get a data readout, I interpret that, and create the DNA profile, which is essentially a set of numbers, and I can use those numbers for comparison.
And when you're going, I'm sorry, you need a minute? Or? No. When you're going through the extraction process on a stain or what you believe is a stain, might you be given the actual exhibit itself, like if I gave you this pen, or may there be a swab from that pen that you're first looking at?
It varies. Sometimes I get an actual item, like a pen, and say, who was possibly handling this pen? And then I have to take a swab and swab that pen for any skin cells that might be left behind. Sometimes I get a swab that was collected from an item. It was collected by the agency that submitted that, say Sanford Police Department or Orlando Police Department. They swabbed the pen themselves, put that swab in a box, and sent that box in to be tested. So then I just have the swab to work with. I take a cutting of that swab with a scalpel, put that in the tube, and perform my testing.
In terms of that second step, you talked about the quantification. Do you need a certain amount of DNA in order to even get a result? And what's the minimum you need?
Well, there's really no minimum. That step tells me about how much DNA I have in the sample, and I use that information for the amplification step. The amplification step, it's kind of like a recipe. Like you have a recipe that calls for 1 cup of sugar. ideally, this recipe calls for about 1 nanogram or 1.5 nanograms of DNA. So I'd like to have that 1.5 or 1 nanogram of DNA to put in that tube in order for the reaction to work right, for me to get a DNA profile that I could use for some kind of comparison. But if I have less than that, I'm still going to go through with the rest of the steps to see, because sometimes I can get less information than the full, complete DNA profile, but it's still enough for me to make comparisons. And then there's plenty of times where I don't have enough DNA, and I don't get any results, or I get very little results. But I still go through with the step. There really is no minimum where I look and say, okay, I don't have enough DNA there, I need to stop. I'm going to go through with it regardless of how much DNA I have in that sample.
And educate us, if you could, nanogram, what is that? How much is that?
A nanogram, it's a very small amount. If you take an index card and cut that index card up into 1 million pieces, that would be about a nanogram, I believe. It's not a quantity that you can touch or feel.
Now, you mentioned also that in the process you're looking for markers or allele or loci, and you mentioned that the test you do is either going to give you 13 or 15 possible, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. In terms of STR, you have 13 or 15. Did I get that right, in terms of markers?
Yes.
Okay. Do you always get 13 or 15?
No, like I said, sometimes based on the sample, the amount of DNA I have or the condition of the DNA, sometimes I get less than the full amount of locations that I'm testing. That would be called a partial DNA profile.
And if you get a partial DNA profile, are you still in certain cases able to make or give an opinion as to the results there?
Yes, sometimes depending on the amount of information I have. There are times where I have so little information I can't make any comparisons to any individuals. But plenty of times with partial DNA profiles I can make some kind of comparison.
So you get an item such as a pen, or you get a swab from the pen, you do all this process, and then do you end up comparing it to a known sample that you know somebody can testify has been taken from a certain individual?
Yes, ideally in every case I'm going to have question samples and known samples. A question sample would be, say, a swab from a pen. I'm trying to determine who was possibly holding this pen. A known DNA sample would be a sample collected directly from an individual. It's usually either a swab collected from the inside of their mouth or some blood that's dried down onto a card to preserve it for future testing. I test those samples, those known samples, the same way as the question samples. However, they are processed at different times, and I develop a DNA profile for that individual, and I use that DNA profile from that individual for comparison to the question samples throughout the case.
And when you're comparing that in terms of an item or DNA or swab from a pen versus a known standard of an individual, if you go through the markers and one doesn't match, are you able to eliminate a person?
That depends on what my analysis of that sample is. If I test, say, a pen swab, and I determine that the DNA profile from that pen is from a single individual, then their entire DNA profile needs to match that entire DNA profile from the pen. So if there's one difference, then that person would be eliminated or excluded from being a possible source of the DNA on that pen. However, there are other times where I have mixtures of DNA, which I'm sure I'll be going into soon, where it's not a clear-cut, everything needs to match. It's a different comparison.
That was going to be my next question. Tell us briefly about mixtures. And are we talking about major and minor, and then possibly at certain points more than one person in terms of 2, 3? Tell us a little bit about mixtures and how it factors in a forensic setting versus a sterile environment.
But when I have a mixture of DNA, I have DNA from multiple people on a sample. So say I test that pen swab and I have an indication of 2 people or 3 people on the results from that swab. That would tell me that I have a mixture. What I need to do from there is try to separate out that mixture into the individual profiles that make up that mixture. And the way I can do that is sometimes one person contributes significantly more DNA to the sample than the other person or the rest of the people in that sample. And that DNA profile for that individual will stand out. And I call that a major DNA profile, if I'm able to resolve out a major DNA profile for that individual. There are times when I can determine a DNA profile for the lesser contributor, usually if the mixture is only of 2 people. But most of the time, I can't tell if a mixture is from 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. There's a lot of overlapping information in that data, and I usually can't determine any DNA profiles for the lesser contributors, but a lot of times I could pick out a major profile, at least from a mixture. In times where I cannot resolve that mixture into individual profiles, then I can still make a comparison to the known standards. I need to compare those known standards to the mixture as a whole to see if their DNA profile is represented in that mixture. And if it is, then they would be included as a possible contributor to that mixture. If they are not, if I feel there's enough absence of their DNA profile that they could no way have contributed to that mixture, then they would be excluded from that mixture. And then there are times where it's somewhere in between. I can't include them in the mixture and I can't exclude them based on what I'm seeing, so I'm not able to make any kind of determination for that person to that mixture.
Sometimes when you examine an exhibit, do you do a preliminary test to determine whether it's even blood?
Yes.
Tell us about that briefly, that testing, what that involves.
Depending on the case scenario, when I open an item and look at it, I could be looking for any of those bodily fluids that I discussed earlier. So if I'm looking for blood and I see a red-brown staining on the article of clothing or the swab or whatever it is, I'll take a rubbing of that stain and try to rub off a little of that material onto a small piece of filter paper, and I apply a series of 3 chemicals. And if I get a pink color change at the end of that series, that would give me an indication that that would be positive for the possible presence of blood.
Before we get into the heart of what you're here, I want to talk briefly about the significance of your findings. Assuming you get DNA results, I want to talk briefly about the population matters. And let me just ask you some questions regarding that if I could. When you examine the results, let's say you get an STR test, do you then determine the probability of a match in terms of what are the probabilities, tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, when I have a match, when I have a single source profile or a mixture and someone matches that DNA profile or they're included in that mixture, I need to put a relevance to that match. If I got a result at one location, at one of the 13 locations that I test, and it matches an individual, what is the relevance of that one location matching an individual? There could be, maybe 4 other people in this room that match that location. So I need to put a statistical relevance to that match. So when I have 13 locations, I perform what's called a random match probability. Or when I have any amount of locations that I get, I perform a random match probability, and it's the possibility that you would pull a random person off the street and test their sample, and that they would match that unknown DNA profile that I got, whether it's at 1 location, 2 locations, or all 13 or 15 locations.
And is there a database that you have as a baseline in order to compare to determine, in terms of the percentage of the population, or how likely is that to occur?
Yes, the different results that I could get at these locations, they aren't evenly distributed in the population. Some results are more common than others. So I use population databases that were put together for the purpose of estimating about how rare or frequent these different results are in certain ethnic groups.
And are you familiar with the database that you all use?
Yes.
Okay. And has that been accepted in the scientific community being reliable in terms of, do you use the PopStats, I believe, or FBI, or what do you use?
I used 2 different databases during the course of working this case. For years, we used the FBI's population database. That is generally used within the scientific community. I did test a couple samples later on in this case where we had switched to a different database. We call that the Butler database because it was created by Dr. John Butler. And that's the one we currently use in our casework.
And has that been accepted in the scientific community as being reliable?
Yes.
Okay. And do you use the product rule in some way too in factoring that all in?
Yes.
Tell us briefly about the product rule.
The product rule, it's a simple statistical concept that says if you have a frequency for one event and a frequency for another independent event, and you want to see what's the frequency that both these events could occur at the same time, you can multiply their frequencies together. So for example, if you have a coin and you flip that coin, you have a 50% chance of heads, 50% chance of tails. Well, if you want to see what's the probability that I'm going to have two coins and I'm going to flip both and they'll both land on heads, you would multiply that 50% for one coin, 50% for the second coin, and you would get 25% that they would both land on heads. This applies to the random match probability, the statistics I use, because these 13 or 15 locations that I test are all inherited independently. So once I determine the frequency that you would find the results at one of these locations in the population, I can then multiply it with the other 12 or the other 14 locations using this product rule to get a frequency that you would find that entire DNA profile.
In terms of some of the results that you're going to talk to this jury about, why are some of the results in terms of the numbers more than the actual population of the Earth, which I believe is now 6.5 or maybe 7 billion? Why is it higher?
I think it's almost 7 billion now, the population of the Earth. It really doesn't have anything to do with the population of the Earth. It's more about the frequency at which I see these results. It's similar to, if you think about it, sometimes you see it posted somewhere that the frequency or the probability of winning the lottery is 1 in a million. Well, that has nothing to do with how many people play the lottery or how many people live in the area. It just has to do with what is the probability that I'm going to match all 6 or 7 of these numbers and get them all right, based on what's the chance that a 1 is going to draw out versus a 44. It's the same concept with the DNA profiles. It doesn't matter how many people are on the Earth or in the Central Florida area or anything. It's just the probability based on how rare or frequent these results show up in these ethnic groups. It's the probability that this entire profile will be seen if you test a random individual.
And I believe the three ethnic groups or race groups you have is African American, Caucasian, and then you have what else? Hispanics, I guess, Southeast Hispanics?
For a long time, when we used the FBI database, we calculated the frequency of profiles for Caucasian, African American, and Southeastern Hispanics populations. Those are the 3 most prevalent in the Central Florida area. When we switched to the new database, when we're using our new system where we're testing 15 locations instead of 13, we do statistics for Caucasian, African American, and Hispanic, as opposed to Southeastern Hispanic.
All right, well, and let's talk about specifically what you did in this case, now that we've got
Yes.
the basic stuff out of the way. I believe you did 3 reports in this case dated March 26, May the 9th, and July the 26th of 2012, and it's under FDLE number 2012, the last 4 digits are 1890. Your reports and your entire file has been copied and previously provided to defense counsel, so with the court's permission, may Mr. Gorgellon refer to his report or notes at any time.
Any objections?
No.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you may do so.
It might be easy, Mr. Gorgellon, if we start off with the standards. I believe you received 2 standards or 2 samples that you did some DNA analysis, and specifically a swab that was represented as coming from the defendant, George Zimmerman, and then also a DNA card or blood card taken by the medical examiner from the victim in this case, Trayvon Martin. Do you recall that, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. And what I want to do is first, with the court's permission, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? Sir, I'm showing you State Exhibit 186. Now, I ask you if you recognize State Exhibit 186, sir.
I do.
How do you recognize State Exhibit 186?
The outer package has our FDLE barcode label with case number. It also has my initials and the date that I opened this package. The internal package also has my initials and the date that I opened and took a cutting from this sample.
Okay. And what do you understand State Exhibit 186 to be, sir?
This is a blood stain card from Trayvon Martin.
Okay. Let me show you State Exhibit 188, and I ask you if you recognize that, sir.
I do. The outer package has our FDLE barcode label, my initials, the date I opened the package. The internal packages with the swabs also have my initials and the date.
And what is that, sir?
This would be buccal swabs taken from George Zimmerman. That would be swabs taken from the inside of the mouth.
Okay. If I just show that to the jury, Your Honor. So all this writing that's on here in terms of, your initials would be on here, right here, right? I got it right. Where would your initials be on here?
Oh, right here.
Okay. And that would be true of all the exhibits, in other words, that you could verify that you actually did analysis on this?
Yes.
Okay. And it would have your FDLE number, and I think you said the yellow print card, or whatever you call this label, is also FDLE?
Yes, the yellow barcode label is from FDLE.
Now, those are what I think you referred to as standards, correct? Known standard from George Zimmerman and also from Trayvon Martin, is that correct?
Yes, those are known standards that were used for comparison to all the unknown samples in the case.
Okay. You do the process, you go through the extraction, quantification, et cetera, you get some results, I'm assuming, right?
Hopefully.
Okay. Did you get some in this case on both of those exhibits?
Yes.
Okay. Do you then prepare, and for the record, I'm going to show you State Exhibit 206, previously been shown to council, no objection. Well, I showed it to the... Okay. I'm going to show you these, I'm going to put it on the projector, but may I have personal witness, Sean? Let me actually show you the actual exhibit so you have it there. And I want you to talk about this and explaining, I believe there's 13 loci of markers on this one, so let me show you State's Exhibit 206. Thank you, Your Honor. Tell us just, when you talked about all these markers, let's go, and you don't have your highlight thing, do you? Or need Mr. Guy's assistance if I could have. What's that? Right here. I'm going to give, may I first witness again, Your Honor? I'm going to give you this fancy pen, I guess, or whatever you call this. And I think the button's right. You see it? Okay. Let's talk about, you got 3 columns here. And actually, I think I can do it here in red too. So you do green, I'll do red. But let's talk about this description right here. What are all these? I know they're referred to as loci. What does this mean right here?
This column right here is they are the names of the 13 locations that I tested for these samples. Their loci it's like a fancy scientific way of saying location. So I test 13 loci. Loci would be plural and locus would be one single location. So these are their names, and they basically represent, about where these locations are located on the DNA molecule.
Who came up with D3S1358? Who came up with that fancy name for that?
I have no idea. They're basically representing where, on what chromosome. This would be on the chromosome 3, chromosome 8, and they represent about where on the DNA molecule that they are located, these locations that I test.
All right, and tell me the significance of this one right here that I'm circling.
Yes, the amylogenin location, it's in addition to the 13 location. It's a sex-determining location, and it gives me an indication of whether or not that individual has 2 X chromosomes, which would make them a female, or an X and a Y chromosome, which would make them a male.
Okay. If you could move to that middle column that's titled JR-2, Zimmerman JR2 is the number, I'm assuming, that was designated by FDLE or by the submitting agency?
Yes, that's the exhibit number, exhibit JR2, and that was from Sanford Police Department.
Okay. Under that column right there, you have, and it appears on each one of on each column, 2 numbers. Tell me the significance of that, if you could.
These numbers here, if you read down, this is the DNA profile for George Zimmerman. These numbers represent different size fragments of DNA that are found at that location. So that's my result at that location. These numbers are called alleles. And what these alleles represent are a different size fragment based on how many repeat units they have on those highly repetitive segments of DNA. And each person, like I said, inherits half of their DNA from their mother and half of their DNA from their father. So that's why at each of these 13 locations, you see two numbers. One came from each parent. There are times where you inherit the same size DNA at the one location, which is why there'll be two numbers that are the same.
Okay, now move on to the last column. I believe that's Trayvon Martin's, and ME3 means from the medical examiner's office, is that correct?
Normally, when an exhibit comes from the medical examiner's office, it has an ME as the abbreviation, but it could be called anything. Really, it's just a letter number designation that's unique to that sample in this case.
And in terms, you have the same on Mr. Martin, in terms of you have two numbers, obviously one from his father, one from his mother, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And while we're using this, if you had a mixture, can you just briefly tell us how that might appear in one of these two? I know you have a standard here, but if you had a mixture from an unknown sample, would you have another number conceivably in one of those columns?
Yes, these two DNA profiles are what I call single source DNA profiles. They came from one individual. These happen to be standards that are going to be used for comparison to the unknowns. If I have a mixture, in a question sample, I may have a mixture, and the way I can tell is I'll have more than two alleles, or more than two numbers at the location. So I may see 3, 4, 5, even 6, 7 numbers at one of these locations, and you'll see that consistently throughout the whole profile. That would give me an indication that I have multiple individuals contributing to that sample.
I want to now move on to the samples that you actually got here, and I want to first address, may I approach the witness, Your Honor? State's Exhibit 170, which are 4 swabs that were taken from a gun recovered from the defendant, George Zimmerman. And I ask you if you recognize said exhibit, sir.
Yes, I do. The outside container has my initials, the case number, barcode label, and the date I opened it. And all the inside containers, the 4 swab containers, also have my initials and the date.
May I publish that to the jury, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
So when you say swab, this is just basically a big Q-tip, I guess?
Yes, it's called the cotton tip swab. It's like a Q-tip, but there's only cotton on one end, and it usually has a wooden, sometimes a plastic stick.
So you've got, in this exhibit 174, separate swabs from different parts of the gun that's already been identified, but do you do an examination as to each one individually?
Yes, I open one exhibit at a time, so even though those 4 were found in the same envelope, they're all packaged separately and they came from different parts of the gun, so I would open one at a time and analyze one at a time.
And in terms of the DNA that you're attempting to get, are you actually, what do you do with the actual swab itself, or the cotton part of the swab? What do? You actually cut it, or what do you do with it?
Well, at first, if it's possible that blood may be present on that swab, I would do the chemical test for the possible presence of blood, and that's done by rubbing it on a piece of filter paper and then doing the actual chemical test on that filter paper. When I've determined if there's blood or no blood, or in this case I'm just going to take these on and do DNA testing regardless of the outcome of that test, I take a scalpel and I cut the cotton portion, whatever I feel I need to take from that cotton portion, and I put that cotton in a tube and perform the testing on it.
Sir, I'm going to show you, with the court's permission, may I approach the witness in a minute, but I'm going to show you State's Exhibit 203, which is a chart that is going to describe in greater detail your findings here, and I've previously been shown to counsel, to Mr. Romero. You want to see?
Yes, you may.
This time we'll formally introduce State's Exhibit 203. I believe there's no objection.
Being offered as an exhibit,
Yes, sir.
as a summary?
Yes, sir.
Summary
He's
exhibit?
going to talk about all of them.
Oh, sure, okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll come in as State's Exhibit 203, thank you.
I apologize, ma'am.
Yes, you may approach.
We're going to talk, while we're at it, about using, obviously, State's Exhibit 203. I want to talk about the 4 swabs that were taken from the defendant's gun. I believe the first one I want to talk about is the swab taken from the pistol grip. If you could, using that part of State's Exhibit 203, tell us the significance of your findings there, and just describe each part that is showing up there, so the jurors can all see that. It's got an FDLE number, right, exhibit number, and then you've got the description of what it is, swab 21A from pistol grip, is that correct?
Yes, this is basically a summary of the testing I did, the results of that testing, and then the statistical analysis. So over here, this is the number that this exhibit got assigned when it came into the FDLE laboratory. I usually refer to them as the agencies, the Sanford Police Department's number, which is over here, which would be, it was DMS 21, and then since there were 4 swabs in the box, they got labeled A, B, C, D. So swab A here was from the grip of the gun, and I did the chemical test for the possible presence of blood on this swab, which gave me a positive result. So that's this column here, whether or not I did that chemical test. The next column is whether or not that sample gave me an indication of a mixture of multiple people, or if it was a single source. So this one here, yes, meaning I got a mixture of DNA from the testing of that sample. I was able to resolve this mixture out. I was able to pick out or determine the major DNA profile in that mixture, and that's right here for the major. I got a complete DNA profile which matched George Zimmerman, and then the statistic here would be the random match probability, the probability that you would pick a random person off the street and that they would also they would match that major DNA profile. So just to read that, the probability would be 1 in 11 quadrillion Caucasians, 1 in 1.5 quintillion African Americans, and 1 in 57 quadrillion Southeastern Hispanics.
Okay.
So going back to the mixture, also for the minor, which would be the lesser contributor or contributors, I was not able, not determined means I was not able to determine a profile for that minor or minor contributors. And the comparison of my other standard, which would be from Trayvon Martin, to that mixture, I determined that Trayvon Martin was excluded as being a possible contributor to that mixture.
So as to this part of the Exhibit 203, the swab or the DNA that you developed from the pistol grip of the defendant's gun, it was positive for blood, correct?
Yes.
And then there was a mixture. The major was matched the defendant, George Zimmerman,
Yes.
and you were able to exclude Trayvon Martin as having DNA on the pistol grip. Is that correct?
Yes, Trayvon Martin was excluded as being a possible contributor to this mixture on the grip.
I want to move next to the second part of the swab from the pistol trigger this time. On the previous exhibit that you examined, did you again perform or try to do the same testing, or tell us what that significance of that FDLE Exhibit 3 was, sir?
The 21B was a swab collected from the trigger of the pistol. I did not perform the chemical test for blood on that exhibit. The swab itself didn't give me an indication that blood might be present. There was very little staining on that swab, so I did not perform that test. I did not get a mixture of DNA, and the results that I got were so limited from that sample that I was not able to interpret those results. So when I get...
Oh, I'm sorry.
When I get less than a complete DNA profile, like I said earlier, I could potentially get a partial DNA profile, but I could also get significantly less results than that. And if it doesn't meet a certain threshold, then I can't make any comparisons or interpretations with any of that data. It was too little data for me to make an interpretation on.
The other swab, I believe, was from the pistol slide. Tell us what your findings were regarding that, sir.
The swab from the pistol slide gave a negative result when I tested it for the possible presence of blood. The DNA testing result was not a mixture. It also gave me limited results. However, I was able to make determinations on this. It was too limited for me to match it to any one individual. However, I was able to make a comparison and potentially exclude any individual that I thought couldn't possibly have contributed to the sample. And as far as the comparison to the George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin, I was not able to include or exclude either of those individuals to that limited sample.
There just wasn't enough there?
I just wasn't able to make a determination. There wasn't enough information for them present to make an inclusion, because I wasn't able to make an inclusion to the sample in general, and there wasn't enough of an absence of their information for me to say there's no way that they could have contributed to it.
I believe the fourth swab was taken from the holster itself. Tell us, and that's the last part of this slide that I've shown you, tell us, if you could, what your findings were regarding that.
The swab from the holster tested negative for the possible presence of blood. The DNA testing gave me a mixture of DNA. I was able to resolve out a major DNA profile for the sample, and that major DNA profile matched George Zimmerman. And the statistical analysis is right here. It's the same: 1 in 11 quadrillion Caucasians, 1 in 1.5 quintillion African Americans, and 1 in 57 quadrillion Southeastern Hispanics. That would be for the probability of the major DNA profile. As far as the minor or lesser contributors, I was not able to determine a DNA profile for any of those minor contributors. And when I made the comparison to Trayvon Martin, I was not able to include or exclude him from the mixture.
So as to the holster where you got a major, it matches George Zimmerman, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you then also examine fingernail scrapings from Trayvon Martin taken at the medical examiner's office?
I did.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
Sir, I'm going to show you what's been, thank you, Your Honor. State's exhibit number 191, and I ask you if you recognize State's exhibit 191, sir.
I do. The outside packaging has my Florida Department Law Enforcement case number, barcode label, my initials, and the date. The two internal packages also have my initials and the date.
And these are not, at least when I look at them, they don't appear to be Q-tips in terms of a little swab at the end. Is that
No.
correct?
It's-
What are these?
It's a wooden scraper stick. It has one pointy edge, and that edge is used to scrape down in between the fingernail and the skin to try to obtain any kind of foreign DNA that might be present under someone's fingernails that might have happened during an encounter or a struggle.
Okay. And so as to State's exhibit I'll get the right number here, 181, I believe, I'm sorry, yes, 191, excuse me. This would have, you can identify it as coming from the fingernail scrapes from medical examiner's office, Trayvon Benjamin Martin, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, may I publish these to the jury?
Yes, you may.
And even though you don't have a swab, how do you remove, if there is any DNA from this? What do you do?
I take a swab and I swab the pointy end to try to obtain anything that is on that pointy end that came from under the fingernails.
And let's, if we could, talk about your findings as to that specific exhibit, sir. I gather there's a right hand and a left hand, is that correct?
Yes, there were two envelopes inside the main envelope. One contained the right hand, which I labeled A, and the left hand was labeled B.
Okay. And if I could, I've put it up on the screen here. Tell us what your findings regarding your DNA analysis of the right hand fingernail scrapings of Mr. Martin.
The right hand, the stick from the right hand had some red-brown staining on it, so I performed the chemical test for the possible presence of blood, and it tested positive. The DNA profile I obtained was a single-source profile, and it matched the DNA profile from Trayvon Martin. In a sample like this, I call this an intimate sample because it's collected directly from an individual's body. So when you collect a sample from an individual's body, their DNA profile is expected to be seen on that swab or on that sample. So what I'm looking for on an intimate sample is anything foreign to that person. And in this case, because the DNA profile matched Trayvon Martin, that means there were no DNA foreign to him on that sample.
In other words, from the right fingernail scrapings of Trayvon Martin, you did not find any of George Zimmerman's DNA there. Is that correct?
No, there was nothing foreign to Trayvon Martin.
If we could move to the second part, which I believe would be the fingernail scrapings from the left hand. If you could tell us your findings as to that, sir.
Yes, the left hand stick was not tested for the possible presence of blood. It did not have any staining on it whatsoever. I swabbed that, performed the testing, and I did not get any DNA results from that swab.
I believe you also examined some swabs, possible DNA swabs from a Skittles bag and also from a flashlight. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. If I may approach the witness again, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Sir, I'm showing you State Exhibit 169, and I ask you if you recognize State Exhibit 169, sir.
I do. The outside as well as the inside contain my initials and the date. The outside also contains my barcode, FDLE barcode label.
And are these two exhibits the swab from the Skittles and also from the flashlight? Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, and are they labeled as such? Does one say a bag of Skittles and the other one say flashlight on it?
Yes. Each box was labeled, and then I took and labeled them A and B.
Your Honor, may I publish that to the jury?
Yes, you may.
In other words, the box itself has labels as to where they came from. One says Skittles and the other one says flashlight, is that correct?
Yes.
We could, I want to ask you about your results or findings regarding those two exhibits, sir. Specifically, let's talk about the, thank you, Your Honor. Let's talk about the swab from the Skittles bag. What were your findings regarding that, sir?
The swab from the Skittles bag gave a positive result for the possible presence of blood. It was a single source DNA profile. It was a partial DNA profile, meaning I got less than the areas. These two samples, I tested 15 areas. It's 15 loci as opposed to the 13 on the rest of the samples in this case. So I got results at less than the 15 locations. However, that partial DNA profile did match Trayvon Martin, and the probability of finding that DNA profile at random would be 1 in 100 quadrillion Caucasians, 1 in 160 trillion African Americans, and 1 in 18 quadrillion Hispanics.
I want to move now to the swab from the flashlight recovered at the scene. If you could, what were your findings regarding that exhibit?
The swab from the flashlight gave a negative result for blood, and I was not able to obtain any DNA results from that swab.
Sir, I now want to move to some analysis you did of a sweatshirt or hooded sweatshirt, do you recall doing analysis, and I'm showing you for the record, State's Exhibit 118, a photograph. Do you recall doing analysis on that exhibit, sir?
Yes, I do.
Okay. With the court's permission, may we turn on the lights for, we're going to show the actual exhibit, so thank you, Your Honor. And just going to go, the court's permission, step down, Your Honor. We're going, let me, if I could, let's try this. Stand over here, just keep your voice a little loud, so let's back up a little bit. Make sure the court reporter can, you got that? Obviously, we've got the photograph up there, but what number is that, Mr. Guy? Is it on the back? 155. 155, do you recognize this, sir?
Yes, I do.
And how do you recognize it?
It has my tag, which is located right down here with the date I examined it, as well as my initials, case number, and exhibit number.
Okay. Now, there appear to be some circles right here and some numbers or letters or something. How did they get there?
Those are the stains that I saw during my visual examination of the item for possible blood. I performed the chemical test for blood on those items, on those stains, and I labeled them A, B, and C.
And we're going to get the photographs, and then we'll also, let me turn this around. You're showing the backside. Did you examine the whole thing itself?
Yes.
Okay. Now, this cutting, did you have anything to do with this cutting right here?
No, that was intact when I examined the item.
Okay. And there appears to be on the backside of this some writing here and some, I would refer to them as holes, but can you explain that, sir?
That would be my stain C that I examined, and those are the cuttings that I took to perform the DNA testing. So for this one, for example, I took 3 small cuttings, put them in one tube, and tested that sample.
So in other words, as opposed to the prior exhibits where you got a swab, you're actually looking at the exhibit yourself and making cuttings?
Correct.
Okay. There also appears to be on this exhibit, I can't testify, so tell me what this means right over here.
That would be stain B. Stain A was on the front bottom. Stain B is right here. And then this is stain C. Those are the 3 stains that I examined.
So from the hooded jacket or sweatshirt recovered from Trayvon Martin, you found 3 separate stains, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and you've labeled them as B, C, and then I think on the front is A, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And does this accurately show the area where you made a cutting in order to determine whether that was DNA or not on there?
Yes.
Okay. And how can you say that actually occurred? Did you take photographs of it too? Did you document it somewhere other than obviously looking at it and you can see there's letters there?
It's all documented in my notes. I do have a photograph, which is on the screen up there, the photograph I took, but it's all documented in my notes, what I did and when I did it.
Okay. Your Honor, may he return back to his seat? Thank you. Mr. Gorgon, let's talk about the findings regarding the hooded jacket recovered from, or that Mr. Trayvon Martin was wearing. And I'm showing you State's Exhibit 119. Can you show us where there's a stain there, or appears to be a stain there?
That would be stain C, which was on the back of the sweatshirt.
Am I circling it right here?
Yes.
Okay. So in addition to actually making your cuttings, you're photographing what you do so that if you had to come and explain it to somebody or testify about it, you would be able to say, this is exactly where I got this cutting and this is where I got this result?
Correct. This is a photograph of before I did any testing. Obviously, there's no cutting taken there yet, but in my notes I describe chemical test for blood, the result, cutting taken, cutting not taken, and so on.
State's exhibit, I'm going back to 203, I believe it is. I want to ask you about the results. Let's talk about stain A that you've shown the jury already. Tell us what your findings were regarding that, sir.
Stain A gave me a positive result for blood, for the possible presence of blood. I obtained a single source profile, so no mixture. It was a partial DNA profile at less than the 13 locations that I test, and it matched the DNA profile from Trayvon Martin.
And I believe you stated stain A from the hooded jacket from Trayvon Martin was in the front, is that correct?
It was in the front lower part of the jacket.
Okay. Let's talk about the stain B, which I believe you stated it was one of the sleeves, is that correct?
Yes, stain B was on the sleeve, the left
All right.
sleeve.
And if you could, tell us what your findings were regarding that, sir.
Stain B tested negative for the possible presence of blood, and I performed no further testing on that stain.
And the stain C, which I believe was in the back of that hooded jacket, what were your findings regarding that, sir?
Stain C gave me a positive result for the possible presence of blood. However, I was not able to obtain any DNA results from my testing.
I believe we have one more. Tell us, if you can, what your findings were regarding that specific exhibit.
In addition to the 3 stains that I tested, I was also asked to swab to see if there was any foreign DNA on the cuffs or the lower part of the sleeves of the sweatshirt. So I collected, well, first I did the test for blood on a rubbing from the entire cuff and lower part of the sleeve. I considered the lower sleeve from about the elbow down to the cuff. So I tested that whole area for the possible presence of blood, which tested negative for the right cuff and sleeve. I swabbed that area to see if there was any DNA foreign to Trayvon Martin, since it was his sweatshirt, so I can expect to potentially see
Secrets of the
his DNA profile there. And it was not, there was no DNA foreign to Trayvon Martin on that right sleeve.
And did you also do that to the left cuff or lower sleeve?
Correct. That was about the same results. It was negative for the possible presence of blood, and I was not able to obtain any DNA foreign to Trayvon Martin from the left sleeve cuff swab that I collected.
I want to make sure the jury understood that. Are you saying that as to the hooded jacket from Mr. Martin, right cuff and left cuff, Mr. Guy, would you help me with this exhibit a minute? I want to make sure we're talking the same thing. Make sure the jury understands. Just go to where the witness is. When we approach the witness, Your Honor. Yes, and for the record, I'm showing you State's Exhibit. Mr. Guy, it's on that side. 155. Okay. Mr. Gorgon, when you're talking about the sleeve, how much of the sleeve are you rubbing? If you could just, with the course of measurement, may he stand up?
Yes, you may.
Tell us how much of the sleeve you're actually trying to get DNA from.
I swabbed the cuff and lower sleeve area, and I considered that from the elbow or midpoint of the sleeve forward. So I did the chemical test for blood from about here forward in the cuff, which tested negative, and I was not able to obtain any foreign
And
DNA.
did you do that also from his left sleeve?
Yes.
Okay. And when you're doing that, are you doing both sides or one side, or what part of the sleeve are you doing?
All the way around, so the front and back of the outside surface.
And then you said you're also tell us about this, what you're doing here at the cuffs?
The same thing, it was all collected with one swab, the cuff area to here.
Okay. And there was nothing foreign to Trayvon Martin. In other words, you didn't find another person's DNA on those, either one of those.
Correct.
Thank you. May I take it back? Thank you, Your Honor. Did you do then examination or analysis on the sweatshirt that Mr. Martin was wearing underneath that hooded sweat jacket?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and do you see before you a photograph of State's Exhibit 120, sir?
Yes,
And did you perform or attempt to perform analysis on that exhibit, sir?
I did.
Okay. I'm showing you State's Exhibit 121, which I believe covers the bottom part of that sweatshirt, is that correct?
Yes, that's the bottom front surface.
Okay. And there appear to be, I'm circling as best I can, some numbers, or I'm sorry, some letters with some circles. How did those get there?
I put those circles there when I was visually examining the item for any red-brown stains that could possibly be blood, other than the large red-brown stain around the hole in the upper left-hand side. Those are any stains other than that. I circled to perform the chemical test and then possibly do DNA testing on those stains.
Mr. Gorgone, let me go back to State's Exhibit 120. When you say you did not do anything around this area that I'm circling right here where it appears there's a hole, is that correct?
Yes.
And why was that, sir?
I was requested to not touch that area. We needed to preserve that area for future testing in another discipline, in another department in my lab, the firearms section. So any disturbance that I cause in that area with my cuttings and rubbings and stuff could affect their future testing, as well as the fact that, you know, around the potential bullet hole there, we're pretty sure we know whose blood that is, and it's not as important as maybe the peripheral stains on the sweatshirt.
Let me then go back to 121. Now, why is it that you put a letter as to each one? Why do you put A, B, and it appears D right here, and then C? Why do you do that?
Just to have a unique identity to that stain, so I can refer back, stain A was positive, stain B was positive, you know, or so on, as opposed to just circling them and you know, getting confused as to which stain. This way I know what stain A is, I know where stain A is, and I know where stain A is located, and I know what I did to stain A and what the results were.
Okay. Let me show you, and let's talk now about your findings. And I apologize, Your Honor. Can we turn the lights back on? I'm going to show them the actual exhibit. Mr. Guy, we're going to try it up there. We approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
State Exhibit 156. We're good. If I can get you to look at this exhibit. Do you recognize this exhibit, sir?
Yes, I do. That has the white tag up towards the collar area, has my initials, as well as the date, the exhibit number, and the FDLE case number.
And can you point to the area that the jury just saw from the photographs in terms of A, B, and C?
Come on. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize, Your Honor. May he stand up?
Here, stain A is located in the lower right-hand portion. Right? Yeah. Right hand. Here's stain B.
Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. I'll tell you what, let me get Mr. Guy to assist us. And with the court's permission, may he just step down? It will do it easier for you. I don't want you. Mr. Gargone, let's go ahead and step down and let's use that table. And I apologize. My fault. Go ahead.
Stain C is located here. Stain D is a large stain in the middle here. And stain E is kind of on the side of the left-hand side.
And let's turn this around and make sure whether there's anything back here or not.
There were no stains located on the back that I performed testing on.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you, sir. May we resume the seat, Your Honor? All right, let's talk about your findings, sir. The gray sweatshirt from Trayvon Martin, stain A. Your Honor, we have assistance with the lights. I apologize. Tell us, if you could, what your findings were regarding stain A.
Stain A, which was located on the lower left-hand side, it tested positive for the possible presence of blood. I was able to obtain a single source, complete DNA profile, which matched George Zimmerman, and the frequency occurrence of that DNA profile was 1 in 11 quadrillion Caucasians, 1 in 1.5 quintillion African Americans, and 1 in 57 quadrillion Southeastern Hispanics.
So, are you saying that in the shirt, gray sweatshirt, assuming Mr. Martin was wearing this, that was underneath the hooded jacket, that you found the defendant's DNA on there? Is that correct? On stain A?
Yes, the complete profile matched the profile of George Zimmerman.
Okay, let me backtrack a second. And stain A would be, believe you said right here, is that correct? I'm showing you
Yes.
for the record, States Exhibit 121. Is
That
correct?
would be stain A, yes.
Let's talk about stain B from the gray sweatshirt of Trayvon Martin, sir.
Stain B also gave me a positive result for the possible presence of blood. I was able to obtain a single source, complete DNA profile from stain B. It matched the profile of Trayvon Martin, and the frequency of occurrence for that complete DNA profile will be 1 in 3.9 quintillion Caucasians, 1 in 3 quadrillion African Americans, and 1 in 290 quadrillion Southeastern Hispanics.
So if we could talk about stain C from the gray sweatshirt, sir.
Stain C tested negative for the possible presence of blood. I did no further testing on that stain.
All right. I believe you also had a stain D, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, tell us what your findings were regarding that.
Stain D tested positive for blood, for possible presence of blood. I was able to obtain a mixture of DNA from that exhibit. The mixture was not resolvable, meaning I was not able to determine which DNA profile in that mixture was a major contributor or a minor contributor. So in that instance, as I explained earlier, I take that entire mixture, all of those numbers at those locations, and compare the known standards to see are those individual DNA profiles represented amongst those alleles, those numbers. And I was able to determine that both George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin were included as potential contributors to that mixture. And then the relevance of that is it's called a combined probability of inclusion, meaning if I pulled a random person off the street, tested their profile, what would be the probability that they would also be included as a potential contributor to that mixture. So the combined probability of inclusion for this mixture from stain D was 1 in 4 million Caucasians, 1 in 2.1 million African Americans, and 1 in 6.4 million Southeastern Hispanics.
And as to that mixture there, you've notated there, it's been notated defendant and Trayvon Martin included as possible contributors, is that correct?
Yes, they are included, both of them.
Okay. I want to talk about stain E from that gray sweatshirt, and what were your findings regarding that, sir?
Stain E tested positive for blood. I was able to obtain a complete single source profile from that, which matched Trayvon Martin. And then
Go ahead, I'm sorry. Well, you've already covered in terms
Okay.
of probability
Yeah.
statistically. Stain E, where would that have come from? And stain D, where would those have come from, sir?
Stain D was the large stain that was in the middle of the front surface. Stain E was the smaller stain that was on the right-hand side, kind of like on the side of the sweatshirt, towards the bottom.
Let's talk about what's been described as the gray sweatshirt from Trayvon Martin, right cuff, lower sleeve. Tell us what your findings were regarding that, sir.
In the same fashion as the dark gray hooded sweatshirt, I did do the chemical test for blood on the lower half of the sleeve and cuff area for this sweatshirt, and the right sleeve and cuff tested negative for the possible presence of blood, and the DNA profile showed nothing foreign to Trayvon Martin.
If I could, did you do the same thing for the left cuff and left lower sleeve?
Yes.
And what were your findings regarding that, sir?
The left cuff and sleeve also tested negative for blood, and the DNA profile I obtained was a mixture. So when I have a sample where I can expect an individual's DNA profile because it was his sweatshirt, I can make that assumption and look at what was foreign to that individual. So there was foreign DNA to Trayvon Martin on that sleeve. However, it was too limited for me to be able to match it to any individual. I was able to potentially exclude if I felt a person could be excluded from that mixture as a foreign contributor. However, with my comparison, George Zimmerman's profile to that foreign DNA, I was not able to exclude him.
I want to then go to State's Exhibit 109, a photograph. I believe this is jacket that Mr. Zimmerman was wearing. There's some letters and circles. Tell us, if you could, what this photograph shows. And we'll actually show you the actual exhibit, but just briefly tell us photographs.
This is a picture I took of the jacket represented as being worn by George Zimmerman. And I did the same visual examination on this jacket for potential red-brown stains that could be blood. And those were all circled. I was able to visually see 17 different stains, red-brown stains, that I wanted to test for possible blood. Those were labeled A through Q on this jacket. Here you can see Q and N and R. They're all throughout the jacket and the sleeves. I used an alternate light source because the color of the jacket and the red-brown stains kind of blended in together. So I used an alternate light source, which is different light bulbs of different wavelength that bring out the fluorescent property of certain bodily fluids. Semen fluoresces, saliva has a little bit of fluorescent property. Blood does not fluoresce. However, the different wavelengths of different light help you see the contrast sometimes between the potential blood stains and the color of the jacket. So using that alternate light source, I located 14 additional stains for a total of 31 stains. Those additional 14 were labeled stain R through stain EE.
Okay. Let me move to State Exhibit 110. Is that the back side of that jacket, sir? Photograph
Yes.
of it?
Yes.
Okay. And State's Exhibit 111, what does that photograph show, sir?
That's the same jacket that was to stain A is located up kind of on the inside of the collar of the jacket, so I wanted to get a good picture of that so I can remember where that stain was located. It wasn't visible in the other pictures.
And am I circling another stain that you located?
Yes, that would be the last stain, which would be stain EE.
And State's Exhibit 112, what does that photograph show, sir?
That's the same jacket. That would be the back side of the right hand sleeve.
And how about State's Exhibit 113, what does that photograph show, sir?
That would be the front side of the right hand sleeve.
And State's Exhibit 114, what does that photograph show?
That would be the back side of the left sleeve.
And State's Exhibit 115, sir.
That would be the front side of the left sleeve.
Your Honor, with the court's permission, may we show the witness and exhibit? And this time I'll ask Mr. Gorgo to step down.
Yes, if you'll please step down.
Showing State Exhibit 151, sir. Gorgo, if you can just kind of show the jury what this exhibit shows, and I'm assuming you identify it by your markings
Yes, this tag here contains my case number. There are my initials, the exhibit number, and the date that I performed this examination.
Okay. And for instance, right here on his right sleeve, there's some writing here in a circle and then some cutting. Do you use the same technique that you talked about earlier?
Yes, I visually examined and used the alternative light source to go through and circle any stains of interest. And then I performed the chemical test for possible presence of blood. Anything that was positive, I took on for DNA testing. Anything was negative, I'd stopped right there.
Now, when you're making all these cuttings from this exhibit, the jacket, do you kind of just put them all in a little bag or a little tube and then just kind of mix it together, or do you keep each cutting that you make, each specific stain that you've labeled, you keep each one separately, or do you kind of just throw them all together?
No, every individual stain that I'm going to perform DNA testing on that gave a positive result, I cut a portion of that out and put it in its own individual tube. And that's the tube that I actually go on and perform the extraction and the quantification and so on.
So you do, as to each particular stain, you do a separate analysis, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Let me just show the jury the backside if we could. I'll trade with you. What is this part of State's Exhibit 151 show, sir?
It's the backside of the same jacket with more stains that I located.
Okay. So each one of these, now some holes apparently appear to be bigger to me visually than some other ones. Is there a reason for that?
It just depends on how concentrated the stain is. If the stain is very light, and I think I might have some difficulty with the amount of DNA present, I take a bigger cutting. And there are times where I even take multiple cuttings from the same stain, if it's a very big stain, and I put those all into one tube, as stain B, for example, with this one here. Some are bigger because I thought I needed a little more sample. I try to determine about what I'm going to need to take in order to get a complete DNA profile. Because if it's a very dark blood stain, I don't need a huge cutting to be able to get a DNA profile. So I'd rather take a small cutting as possible so that there's more of the stain left in case I need to go back or someone else needs to go back and do testing on that.
And if you take like 2 cuttings out of this stain that I believe is labeled, is that a B there?
That's a B.
Okay. In other words, those would be, because it's in the same circle, those would be in the same tube, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. If the multiple cuttings are in the same circle, part of the same stain, I put those in one tube and call it stain B. However, a stain B tube is separate than a stain D tube. Those are 2 separate tubes, 2 separate tests with different results, or potentially different results.
All right, Mr. Gorgel, resume the seat. Thank you. Let's, if we could, Mr. Gorgel, talk about your findings here. Let's talk about stain A, what were your findings regarding that as to defendant's jacket?
Stain A gave a positive result for blood. I was able to obtain a complete single source profile which matched George Zimmerman.
Okay. Let's talk about stain B from that jacket, sir.
Stain B gave the same result, positive for blood, matched complete single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
And I gather in your analysis here, if you would have found evidence of Trayvon Martin on there, you would have documented, is that correct?
Correct.
In other words?
If I determine that a profile I obtained from a stain is from a single source, meaning there's no indication of a second person's DNA in that sample, then I compare it to the standard. If that matches, then that's a single source profile matching a known sample, and there's no foreign DNA. If I see some foreign DNA to that single source profile, then that's when I would indicate that I have a mixture of DNA.
Now, in terms of the stains you're looking at, are you looking just for blood, or are you just looking for, in other words, can there be other stuff other than blood there that would be DNA foreign to somebody?
Yes, well, these stains tested positive for blood, and I took those cuttings that we were looking at, put them in a tube, and tested it. As far as what my results are from, I mean, if I have a blood stain, it's a pretty safe assumption that that DNA, or at least some of that DNA in that sample, came from that blood stain. But there's no way for me to tell, if I get a mixture of DNA, there's no way for me to tell, okay, this major came from the blood and this minor came from skin cells from someone touching the jacket or from saliva that's on the jacket. My DNA results, I can't tell exactly where those came from as far as the blood, semen, saliva, whatever bodily fluid I'm looking for on that item.
But so far as the stains A and B, they're both matching the defendant, and in other words, Trayvon Martin is not on either one of those stains, is that correct?
Yes, the profile in those two match the defendant.
State's exhibit, stain C from defendant's jacket, sir.
Stain C gave the same results, positive for blood, a complete single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain's exhibit, stain D from defendant's jacket, what were your findings regarding that, sir?
Stain D tested negative for blood. So that was as far as I went with that one.
Okay, stain E from defendant's jacket, what were your findings regarding that?
Stain E gave a positive result for blood. So I brought that on to DNA testing. It gave me a mixture of DNA. I
Okay.
was able to resolve out a complete DNA profile for the major contributor to the mixture, and that matched George Zimmerman. The minor, I was not able to determine any DNA profiles for the lesser contributors or minor contributors, and I was not able to make any determination as far as if Trayvon Martin was included or excluded to that mixture.
And is that because you didn't have enough there to be able to say it is Trayvon Martin or it isn't?
I was able to make inclusions or exclusions to that mixture. However, when I made the comparison, it was in that in-between stage that I talked about, where I didn't have enough of his information to say he's definitely included in this mixture, and I didn't have enough absence to say I believe for sure that he could not have contributed to the mixture.
And do you recall stain E where it was on defendant's jacket, sir?
I would have to look at the picture again.
Okay. We can go back to the exhibit, but go ahead if you need to look at the picture.
Stain E was located on the back right shoulder of the jacket, so right about here, the back of the right shoulder.
I'm sorry, the back right shoulder of the jacket, is that correct?
Yes.
Let's move on to stain F from the defendant's jacket.
Stain F tested negative for blood, so no DNA testing was performed.
Stain G.
Stain G gave me a positive result for the possible presence of blood. The DNA testing of that item gave me limited results, so limited that I was not able to make any kind of interpretations on that result.
Stain H from defendant's jacket, sir.
Stain H tested negative for blood.
Stain I.
Stain I gave me a positive result for blood. The DNA testing showed a mixture of DNA. I was able to resolve out a partial DNA profile for the major contributor to that mixture, which matched George Zimmerman. And the statistical analysis over here is on that partial profile for that major contributor. The minor, I could not determine a DNA profile for any of the lesser contributors to the mixture. However, in my comparison, Trayvon Martin was excluded as a possible contributor to that mixture.
So in other words, there's no way that was Trayvon Martin. You excluded him completely.
Yes, that was my determination.
Stain J, from the defendant's jacket.
Stain J gave a positive result for blood. The DNA testing gave me a complete single source profile which matched George Zimmerman.
Okay. Defendant's jacket, stain K, sir.
Stain K gave a positive result for blood. I obtained a complete single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain L from the defendant's jacket, sir.
Stain L also gave a positive result for blood. The testing was the same, complete single-source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain M from that jacket, sir?
That would be the same result, positive for blood, single-source complete profile matching George Zimmerman.
States N?
Stain N gave a positive result for blood. I obtained a mixture of DNA. The major contributor and the DNA profile for the minor contributor in this sample were both resolved.
And what
Meaning-
were your findings?
The major contributor matched George Zimmerman, and the minor, which was a partial profile for that minor contributor, that matched Trayvon Martin.
And when you say a partial profile, what do you mean?
Meaning I was able to determine the minor, lesser contributor's profile at less than the 13 locations.
Okay. And do you recall where stain N was on defendant's jacket, sir?
Stain N is on the front right upper part of the jacket. So the kind of the front of the right hand shoulder.
Stain O, sir. What were your findings regarding that?
Stain O tested positive for blood. I got a complete single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Continuing defendant's jacket, stain P, sir. What were your findings regarding that?
Stain P gave a positive result for blood, a complete single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain Q?
Excuse me. Stain Q was negative for blood.
Stain R?
Stain R was also negative for blood.
Stain S?
Stain S also negative for possible presence of blood.
Stain T?
Stain T was also negative.
Continuing defendant's jacket, stain U, sir.
Stain U gave a positive result for the possible presence of blood. I obtained a mixture of DNA that I was not able to resolve into any single source major or minor contributors. When comparing the two DNA standards to the mixture, I determined that Trayvon Martin was included as a possible contributor to the mixture, and then the statistical analysis is over here for anyone who could potentially, probability that you could potentially be included in that mixture. That would be 1 in 83,000 Caucasians, 1 in 10,000 African Americans, and 1 in 67,000 Southeastern Hispanics. And the comparison of George Zimmerman to the mixture, I was not able to make any determination as far as whether he was included or excluded.
So in that particular stain, Trayvon Martin is included as a possible contributor. Where was that stain on the defendant's jacket, sir?
Stain U was located on the cuff of the, it was kind of on the bottom of the right hand cuff. There's like a Velcro part, I guess, to tighten the cuff, and it was on that piece of Velcro on the bottom of the right
Can you
hand cuff.
demonstrate that in terms of what you're saying, the right?
Right hand cuff, right about in this location.
So that would be the defendant's, assuming he was wearing that jacket, that would be in his right side, right near his right hand, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir. State's exhibit, State's exhibit, defendant's jacket, stain V.
Stain V gave me a positive result for the possible presence of blood. The DNA results were too limited for me to be able to match to anyone. However, I was able to possibly exclude people if I felt they could be excluded from that limited results. However, I was not able to make a determination on either George Zimmerman or Trayvon Martin, so I was not able to exclude either of them.
State's exhibit, defendant's jacket, stain W, sir.
Stain W was negative for blood.
And stain X from defendant's jacket, sir.
That was also negative for blood.
Stain Y, sir.
Stain Y was negative as well.
Defendant's jacket, continuing stain is Z like in zebra.
Stain Z gave me a positive result for blood. However, the DNA testing was too limited for me. The results were too limited for me to be able to make any kind of interpretations.
Defendant's jacket, stain AA, sir.
Stain double A was negative for blood.
Stain double B, sir.
Stain double B was positive for the possible presence of blood. I received or obtained a mixture of DNA. I was not able to resolve that mixture into any kind of major or minor single source profiles. George Zimmerman was included as a possible contributor to the mixture, and the probability of inclusion for that mixture was 1 in 58 Caucasians, 1 in 41 African Americans, and 1 in 57 Southeastern Hispanics. I was not able to exclude or include Trayvon Martin to the mixture.
Do you recall where stain BB or double B was in the defendant's jacket?
Stain BB is on the back surface of the jacket. It's on the left hand shoulder on the back, kind of towards the middle, so almost below the neck. It looks like it's about 6 or 7 inches from below the neck on the back.
Stain double C on defendant's jacket, sir?
Stain double C tested negative for blood.
Defendant's jacket, stain double D.
DD tested negative as well for blood.
And finally, defendant's jacket, stain double E.
Stain double E was negative for blood.
Sir, I'm going to now move and show you State's Exhibit 116. I believe that was identified as defendant's shirt underneath the jacket that he was wearing. Do you recognize that photograph, sir?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Did you perform some DNA analysis on that exhibit, sir?
I did.
All right. And we're going to show the jury the actual exhibit with the court's permission, but I'm circling what appears to be here some kind of holes or circles or something. Is that the same kind of analysis you did in terms of cuttings?
Yes, I performed a visual analysis of this item, and I was able to obtain, or to visualize, all red-brown stains that I was interested in potentially testing. They were labeled A through P on this one. There were 16 total stains.
State's Exhibit 117, is that the backside of that same exhibit, sir, or item?
Yes.
Photograph of it? Okay. With the court's permission, may we show the witness, and may Mr. Gorgon step down again?
Yes, sir, please step down. Okay, we have a paper change, so you can move with the exhibit, but just wait to speak.
Mr. Gorgon,
Wait.
I apologize.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
You ready, Madam Court Reporter? Sir, I'm showing you State's Exhibit 153. It's been identified as gray shirt worn by George Zimmerman under that jacket. And if you could just tell briefly the cuttings. I apologize, Mr. West needs to.
That's fine, go ahead.
If you could just tell us what this shows.
This is the shirt represented as being worn by George Zimmerman, and these are the stains that I performed the chemical test for blood. A through H is located on the front, and then J is up here on the top of the back of the neck, and there are more on the back.
Yeah, we're going to show you that.
The stain I is here on the cuff of the right hand.
All right. So this would be the front side of the shirt, is that correct? Long
Yes.
sleeve shirt? And so you found, potentially, you made cuttings from the front side, and these are all here in the front?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, and if he was wearing a jacket, these are still, in other words, if the jacket was closed, this is still underneath the jacket, I'm assuming. In other words, this shirt, if he was wearing it like you would wear a shirt, is that correct?
I would assume the shirt would be underneath the jacket.
Okay. And let me show you the back side of this exhibit. And tell us what that shows there, sir.
This is the back side of that same shirt. Here's my tag with my initials, the date, the case number, the date I examined it on. There are two K and L, stains K and L are on the back of the neck, and then M through P are here in the middle of the back.
In your honor, may Mr. Gorgon resume the seat? And we move this back.
Please take your seat, sir.
Mr. Gorgon, I'm going to ask you about your findings regarding the defendant's shirt. Let's talk about stain A first. What were your findings regarding that, sir?
Stain A gave a positive result for blood. I obtained a complete single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain B from that shirt, sir?
Stain B also gave a positive result for blood. I obtained a single source profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain C from the defendant's shirt?
Stain C gave a positive result for the possible presence of blood. Also, single source complete DNA profile matching George Zimmerman.
And so at least these three stains, you're finding that it's positive in terms of blood, correct, versus just regular DNA?
Yes, they were positive for blood.
Okay. States Exhibit D?
The same result for stain D, positive for the possible presence of blood. Complete DNA profile matching George Zimmerman.
Stain E from the defendant's shirt?
Stain E would be the same result, positive for blood. Complete single source matching George Zimmerman.
Again, defendant's shirt, stain F?
Stain F gave the same result.
Stain G from defendant's shirt?
Stain G was negative for the possible presence of blood and no further testing was performed.
Stain H from defendant's shirt?
Stain H was also negative for possible presence of blood.
Stain I from defendant's shirt?
Stain I was positive for blood. It gave a single source complete profile which matched George Zimmerman.
Stain J from defendant's shirt?
Stain J gave the same result, complete, a positive for blood, complete single source matching George Zimmerman.
Stain K from defendant's shirt?
Stain K gave a positive result for the possible presence of blood, single source matching George Zimmerman.
Stain L from defendant's shirt?
Stain L gave the same result,
Meaning matching
meaning
George
positive for blood matching George Zimmerman.
Stain M from defendant's shirt?
Stain M, same result, positive for blood, complete single source matching George Zimmerman.
Stain N from defendant's shirt?
Stain N, same result, positive for blood, complete single source matching George Zimmerman.
Stain O from defendant's shirt, sir?
Stain O was the same exact result, positive for blood, complete single source matching George Zimmerman.
And stain P from defendant's shirt, sir?
Stain P, positive for blood, single source, complete profile matching George Zimmerman.
We're through for the light, Your Honor. Thank you very much. If I may have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
I don't have any further questions. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Cross?
May we have a short recess?
Yes, we may. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a 15-minute recess. Please put your notepads face down on the chair and follow Deputy Jarvis. Please be seated. Mr. Gorgon, you're free to walk around for the 15-minute recess, but you're not free to discuss your testimony with anybody, and that includes the lawyers. Okay? Yes, you may. Court will be in recess for 15 minutes.